So Lee, I was talking to a senior executive the other day, and he was wondering how he could get the organization to a new level in terms of performance. And I mentioned some aspects of positive leadership to him, and he was really excited about it.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that we could talk to a leader like that about is our way of thinking about positive leadership at IE, which has three components, as you well know, from the teaching that you and I have both been doing. Positive leadership has first the component that we call mindware, which is really about understanding how the mind works, how the mind or the brain generates behavior. And we've talked a lot about the different things like attention and working memory and long-term memory and some of the cognitive biases that we all have there. And so I think one of the ways that we could help leaders is by helping them understand their mindware, and then engaging them in training programs related specifically to different components of mindware, like attention. Right?
Something like mindfulness, for example.
Like mindfulness,
Yes.
which is of course now a secular way to focus on just training your attention so it's more open and a little bit less reactive in those meetings that happen at work when someone gets you upset.
That's right. And of course, besides mindware, there's the aspect of the environment, which is really important, because at the end, if you are working in an organization where the environment is not adequate and it's not pushing you, it's not helping you to reach your potential, it becomes very difficult. Ken Robinson spoke about it in his TED Talk about creating the right conditions and creating the right environment. And then we have all of Barbara Fredrickson's work around positivity and positive and negative emotions, how important emotions are at work, because most people don't realize, they think they're not emotional at work, but we're emotional at work and at home. Everybody's emotional,
Yeah, and I love Ken Robinson's quote about how leadership isn't about command and control, it's about climate control.
Right.
And I think when we sit down with leaders and we ask them about climate, they talk about really generic things like the physical environment and
having
bonuses,
free food
at the cafeteria and bonuses. But when we talk about the climate in positive leadership, of course, we're talking about things like the emotional climate, as you mentioned, and the idea that when an employee comes into work and they have a really good problem solving or brainstorming session, they feel positive emotions, they feel proud. And then when they have to go have a really difficult conversation with someone and it's a big conflict and emotions get heated up, they walk out really negative. And as you said, Barbara Fredrickson's work, she's the leading scientist, of course, in the field, shows pretty clearly that ratio of positive to negative has to be high for our mindware to work at its best.
And of course, what's also really important is that we are more focused on negatives as humans, and we tend to focus on negatives, and we're very good at detecting danger, and we're not as good as detecting positives. So that's why some simple exercises like just writing down at the end of the day 3 good things that happened to you help you improve your positive to negative emotional ratio. It's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, and there's a link to what you said before with mindfulness. When we're training our attention, I guess, to be more focused on positives, then we get used to finding them. We get in the habit of looking for positives, which I think can help leaders become better leaders in the sense of that they're more focused on what's going well at work and not just always trying to solve the latest problem and put out the latest fire.
And of course the third aspect is behavior, which is all about individual change, which is really difficult, and habit hacking, which we both teach at the IMBA. And what do you think about habits for senior leaders? Is that a big issue for them?
I think it's critical, because I think whether it's training your mind in the mindware piece that we talked about, or whether it's trying to put in place new behaviors as the leader to set the climate, to be a good climate controller, you're talking about unwinding an old habit that may be not so productive and in trying to rewire a new habit. And I think we both know from our own New Year's resolutions that very few of us stick to our plans, and this idea of habit hacking, this using neuroscience of habits to help people have a much more high probability success in changing a behavior, I think is really important.
I think from our experience with executives, there's many tips and tricks that you can use to be more successful, like gamifying, like measuring. We can talk about wearables and how that can help you measure some of your behaviors. We can talk about socializing, letting other people know. It's been proven that you're much more likely to succeed in a habit change if you actually tell other people about it. So there's many things that actually can help you improve some professional habits, like being a better listener or being less of a micromanager, etc.
Learning to let go of control, or getting less impatient in teams when things aren't going the way you want, and the meeting agenda might be a little bit off topic, so to speak, which only happens once in a while. But I think and also with habits, there's those behavioral tricks you mentioned, but I think there's also just helping people break down a habit into its components.
Yeah.
I think we've both experienced how that helps people think about a behavior in a different way. When you figure out what triggers my unproductive behavior, of course, what is specifically is my behavior. I mean, you and I have talked about 5 different ways you could be a bad listener. You can be one of those people who interrupts. You can be one of those people who just checks out and thinks about your tasks and your own to-dos. So understanding specifically what the behavior is, and then the critical piece, of course, is the reward. What's the candy? I mean, we earn some kind of candy for doing every bad behavior that we have, and I think we've both seen that when people identify the ego stroke that they get from doing it, or a sense of control they get from interrupting people, when people realize that, I think it's been quite powerful. Some of the leaders that we've worked with, when they have that moment of realization.
Right. I mean, we look at the cue, routine, reward, and I mean, I think for me the key actually, you mentioned reward. That's very, very critical when they realize that why they're actually doing something, and then also helping them understand that they need to substitute the routine.
Yeah.
So it's not just eliminate a routine, but it's substitute a new routine, because the cue is going to happen. You're going to have to go to meetings, so you're going to have to be in meetings. So might as well make the best of it and actually reward the behavior you want, which might not be your old behavior. So.
Yeah, and I think it turns out to be pretty tricky, right? Because I mean, you can't. When people say, "Well, okay, so now I'll just listen to people," well, that lasts about 2 seconds and then it ends.
Yeah, we get into willpower there. That's a different issue. Yeah,
and we get into willpower, and we have to use creative solutions. So
Yes,
that's when paraphrasing, taking notes when other people are talking, so you don't lose your own thoughts. Those are all active strategies for replacing the routine, the bad routine, with a better routine. So the senior managers that you were talking to the other day that asked you about positive leadership, do they ask for any specific examples of things that have worked in other companies and with other managers?
Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that they want to look for references and have some real life examples. So, I mean, what I mentioned, what just came to mind was how to use appreciative inquiry to get to a goal, how to reach a goal with appreciative inquiry, which is, of course, as you know, around aligning people on the positives, on the strengths of an organization, of people, and helping them from those strengths get to those goals instead of focusing on negatives, which is what we do most of the time. We were talking before about climate, and many companies have a negative climate, or they focus a lot on negatives, and we know that negatives impact humans 2 to 3 times as much as positives. So in this case, I mean, that's what I talked to them about.
Yeah, and really, it's just so subtle, isn't it? Because it sounds like it's just a semantic difference, but when you put people in the positive frame and think about the future, it's really different. You get different results than when you put them in a negative frame and they're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah,
So.
and you had some experience with habit hacking with execs, right?
Yeah, I worked with a president of a bank, and he was working on a habit hack where it involved some ego as one of his rewards for doing this kind of unproductive and not particularly nice behavior. And as he was thinking it through, he uncovered this sort of deeper, let's say, set of attitudes and beliefs related to his habit. And so what he did was he worked on changing those deeper attitudes and beliefs. And what he found is that by changing those deeper attitudes, it was like a domino effect. And by knocking over that one attitude and belief, he was able to actually change a lot of habits simultaneously. So it was the first time I'd ever actually seen that.
And did people in the organization, could they tell the difference? I mean, was it apparent?
They could. And in fact, some of the people that knew him quite well, that were also in the program with him in our positive leadership executive masters, were commenting on just how much he'd changed interpersonally since he did that. So.
Okay.